Well, I've been looking forward to this interview for some time. I'm with the executive director of the Cornerstone Trust, Stephan Bauman, but before that, you were president, CEO of World Relief. That's quite a change.
Yeah, fantastic organization, World Relief. I miss them. They serve the most vulnerable around the world, working with local churches. And yet the shift was something that we'd anticipated for some years. The question that Belinda and I had asked for years is, what will we do next? After 12 years at World Relief, question came to me, Stephen, if you were to do anything else, what would you do? I said, well, I love World Relief. I don't know if I'd change anything, except if I had the opportunity, I'd serve many organizations, not just one.
Okay.
And then I said the second thing, kind of haphazardly out of humor, I said, if I could give away money instead of raise money, that'd be fun too. So that happened months ago, and then along the way, in journeys and conversations with some good friends, somebody posed the question, well, would you consider working in philanthropy? And I said, well, yeah, that would be a dream. And that little statement led to some conversations that led us to make the shift just this past summer.
But you're a programs guy. That, at least the numbers of people I know in philanthropy, don't typically come from that background. How is that helping you? How is that possibly even hindering you?
Yeah, so my journey, I started in business, but very young. I was only 5 years into business. I went abroad with Belinda, and we were volunteered for just 5-6 months. We ended up staying 6 years sub-Saharan Africa. So I kind of came into this world by accident, by surprise, and 6-7 years on the field in Africa, then back, and then back again for another 3. So love the front lines and have great regard for the people who are doing extraordinary things across the world, and World Relief, World Vision, so many organizations. Now, this job, shifting to philanthropy, interestingly enough, the foundation that I'm with now, you mentioned Cornerstone Trust, their desire is to have somebody from the practitioner, from the ministry world, to step into the executive director role. That surprised me. I actually didn't know that was their desire until after they said, would you come and join us? Their desire is to have somebody that knows the other side, that's on the front lines, that's asking the question, that has their hands dirty. So it was kind of a match made in heaven. I didn't expect them to want to bring somebody from the program side, from the ministry side, from the nonprofit world into philanthropy, because I'm learning a new world.
Now,
but that was their desire.
From the nonprofit world, does this mean the reports are going to become more arduous, or are they going to become a little bit easier? What does this mean?
Maybe simplify on one hand, but I can also see through things, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah, both that.
In picking up this job, you did what a lot of people do when they're entering a new phase or a new job. You went around and actually talked to the people that do it. You told me how many foundations did you talk to?
Oh, maybe a half a dozen. I'm still in the process. And, it's been an extraordinary journey. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences, but the most important thing is incredible, great people doing philanthropy, money coming to the gathering. So you come away inspired, and I did. A couple things that I learned. One is philanthropy is somewhat setting the new pace, right? And I think you see that in the greater philanthropic place or space with Gates and now Zuckerberg, and it's just a whole new game being played in philanthropy, much more hands-on, much more engaged. Data is a major factor in giving today, and accountability to that data. So the changes there are affecting and are taking place in Christian philanthropy as well. So I come into philanthropy with a lot of the same questions I've had as a program person or even as a CEO of World Relief, which is, how do we know we're having impact? And how do we make sure that people are deeply engaged, and it's not an us versus them, but it's us together. So it's actually a very exciting day to be thinking about philanthropy and giving. There's more wealth than there's ever been, but there's more heart and more thought going into philanthropy than certainly even 5-10 years ago. So it's really exciting, and I think it makes places like the Gathering and other places that we're engaged on these thinking together ever more important today.
You're now sitting on the philanthropy side. What do they need to know about the NGO side, this side that you came from?
Yeah, I think sometimes we in the NGO or the nonprofit or the ministry, we're afraid to tell the whole story.
Why is that? Why do you think?
Well, I think we're afraid that if we tell our failures or our struggles, that donor or that foundation won't give us any more money. I mean, I think it's as basic as that, and I think that's kind of the elephant in the room. But I had a conversation this morning with some of the family members from the foundation I serve. And they're saying things like, we really want to know where we're struggling, where the ministries are failing, so that we can give better and learn together. So I'm excited about maybe some folks in the foundation world and the donor space can encourage telling and being transparent with the whole story so we can all learn.
If you were to switch that, and what does the philanthropy side need to hear from the NGO side? What would you be saying?
Well, the philanthropists need to know how hard it is and how complicated it is. And things like scale. Scale matters in certain issues. We talked earlier today, Steve, about refugees and the crisis in Syria. Scale matters there. So you need big giants in the room to tackle that cause along with smaller organizations. I think philanthropists need to know what it's like to turn the lights on in office buildings around the world, not just pull the fruit off the tree, if you will, the ministry or handing the glass of water or delivering the food. So the full picture that is not, it's being talked about more and more, but I think there's much that we as philanthropists can learn from ministry leaders.
One of the things that obviously would occupy a busy executive of some place like World Relief is the amount of travel, especially to some of the most difficult places in the world, which would give you then a reflection on what are the most strenuous, the most difficult, where does the church need to focus into the future? If you were a bit of a prophet today, what would you say, church, Jesus people, you need to pay attention to what would be 3 or 4 or 5 places or things or issues that we need to kind of wake up to?
So there's places in the world that are getting better, and we talk about that a lot. We should celebrate, poverty. Children under the age of 5 live today than have, 20, 30 years ago. Some major progress. But then there's countries that kind of fallen off the map, called fragile states, places where poverty is so entrenched, where conflict, and interestingly enough, that's where you have some of the refugee situations, people fleeing their country. It's often where there's ethnic violence or war, or civil war, whatever it is. So those hot spots, I think we as followers of Jesus should keep a list of places in the world that are the least and the most vulnerable. Places like Syria today, certainly places like South Sudan or Yemen. We don't talk about some of those countries enough until they make CNN. And I think that we should actually be forcing the journalists to pay attention to some of those hot spots. Then I think there's some cross-cutting issues. For example, women and the price that women pay relative to men in the world when it comes to poverty, when it comes to water, when it comes to being trafficked and so on. So I think we need to spend more time there as followers of Jesus thinking about the women of the world. And you could probably just include women and children in that. I think that's an issue that's not going away and is actually getting worse in many places of the world.
Now, Melinda Gates made this obviously a significant issue at a recent gathering of church leaders at Willow Creek, talking about not just maternal health, but just even the role of women in all of these issues and the power of women, or the disempowerment of women, more likely. Do we have a theological issue? Those of us who would be, consider ourselves Jesus followers on this particular issue, is this an area of growth? And if so, what do we need to do about it?
So there's a theological issue on whether women should be in the pulpit or be ordained. And I think, we all have different opinions on that. I don't know if we have to worry so much about that to tackle the broader issue of oppression against women worldwide. We know women should be leaders in their family. We know women should be leaders in their community. We know women should be leaders in overcoming some of the challenges they face. So there's so much we have in common. Now, we can take issues, and I think we should take position on the issue of women in leadership in the church. And I think that's a worthwhile cause to be debated. But that shouldn't prevent us from stepping out on the, millions and millions of women that we all agree on should be empowered to overcome, the challenges they face.
So much of the world knows you and your wife, Belinda, as just a tremendous tandem in terms of bringing the world's need to our doorstep so that we begin to understand it, can engage in it appropriately. And now moving to the foundation side, what's Belinda going to be doing?
Yeah, so Belinda and I have always worked together, usually very different roles. We're very differently gifted. But we have very like passion, right? We went to Africa together when we were 23 and we were just married. So we talk about it, we thrive, we think about it all the time. So Belinda's taken a cause of serving, helping, mobilizing people on the issue of violence against women in war zones. And she actually been doing some great work on that front, started a campaign called 1 Million Thumbprints. So now that I've shifted to philanthropy, for Belinda, it's portable. I mean, what she did in the greater Washington, D.C. area and worldwide, she can do out of Grand Rapids. So she carries on, and I actually cheerlead her and support her just as she does the same for me in philanthropy. So we don't tend to share roles or often organizations, but she's a star, and she's just impassioned by many of the same things that I care about as well. So part of the move for me is thinking through how I can give her more time so she can fly, because so often she's stayed home as I've traveled and so on. So there's certainly a both and there with Belinda in mind.
Stephan, you've written a book called Possible, provocative title, especially for a change agent to write, which I think is a terrific book. It's about changing the way we look at changing the world. Why did you write this book?
Yeah, so I'm not the likely person to be doing what I'm doing today. I began to see that people like me can actually be very helpful. I thought it was medical doctors. I thought it was missionaries or Bible translators are really what the world needed to sort of solve some of these big issues or tackle some of these big issues. And what I learned is that people like me, strategists and thinkers, and looking at situations and thinking, how can we do this differently, are actually a real present need in ministry and nonprofits. So I stepped into this back door. And as I've lived a number of years now working in that space, I actually begin to see that the ones that can have the most impact are not the most likely ones. I mean, we serve a role in the ministry world or in the philanthropy space, but there's an everyday person role for all of us. And so the book is positive. It's about what possibilities there are for a person that picks a topic, picks an area of the world, maybe learns a little bit of the language, and maybe never quits their day job, right? Often it's better if we don't. And the impact that we can have. So the book is story after story about everyday people, not just myself, many others that are changing the world. And it's how we do it differently that matters. When we face some of the challenges today and we consider their scope and their magnitude, we have to think about doing it differently. So the book is about change.
You could have called it permission, because I kind of got the sense after reading it that this is an opportunity for everyone plays. This is not, there's no sideline position.
There is no sideline, and it's an invitation. And then some people were surprised that a professional from a relief and development organization, which is I previously served, would invite the whole world.
Yeah, we're supposed to be pay, pray, and get out of the way.
And the world has shifted. And I think that everybody can have a meaningful role in changing the world. Everybody should play a role. The world is small. The world is not far away anymore. So it's a wide open invitation. And if people say yes, then how do we do it well? And that's a question, a commitment that I have to anybody that I serve in my own life is, okay, yeah, I want to say yes to this, but I want to do it well. And whatever it takes to do it well, to learn and to listen from those who are on the front lines, to take the long view on an issue rather than to flit from one to the next. Refugees, I think people need to commit to that for a lifetime. And if they do, they will find that they can have impact, and they'll actually be personally fulfilled in what they're able to do in their lives.
Well, it's a tremendous book in that it has numerous stories. I mean, it's a story, one story after another, of individuals who are actually living this out. My guess is if any pastor's sermon is usually a sermon to themselves long before it ever reaches the pulpit, how did the book change your view? Because my guess is in the writing of it, there was a transformation that was taking place. It seems very obvious as you're reading the book that something's happening to you. What did happen to you?
Yeah, so for me, my story is I was in the business world, and Belinda, who's one of my heroes, she says, Stephen, why can't we go do something hands-on and volunteer? I says, how about the youth group down the road? She says, how about Africa? I said, maybe next year. Next year, I said, maybe next year. And then so we finally went, and I'm thinking, maybe I can help those people that can really do it. And I find out, well, actually, one of the greatest needs is just leadership and strategy and rethinking how we do things. And Belinda's a storyteller, so she's there just, building these friendships and telling stories and listening. So we come away after 6 months saying, wow, there's a huge need for the average everyday person. I'm the least likely guy to be doing what I'm doing today. So I come with that perspective. And as I'm writing these stories and listening and interviewing people, particularly Africans and Asians and Hispanics, and I'm hearing what it meant for them to change their community or to light their church on fire. And so I come away from the book ever more excited about how the world is becoming so flat that an African woman who, maybe we would consider poor, but she has a phone and she has a voice, and she can pray, and she can really change her community, and we're seeing that happen. So the shift for me is no longer do I need to be the leader, but I can be a catalyst. I can join others who are changing, and it changes, it just changes my life along the way. So our stories are not the likely stories. And so my invitation in the book is for everyone. Anybody can pick a cause and stick with it for a while, maybe for a lifetime, and you'll be shocked and surprised at what God does in and through us.
Well, you're very much of a catalyst in a variety of fields. I do begin to wonder, boy, what is the next 5 to 10 years? What is that going to look like? Again, wide open. But with the background you've got, I can tell you, for all of us who are watching, it's going to be thrilling. And we're delighted you're with us at the gathering and having a chance to share, especially on the issue of Syrian and Iraqi refugees, the global refugee crisis. Thanks for being with us in this interview.
Awesome to be here. Thank you, Steve.